How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Sector 6, and today we're finally talking about it. It is finally time to talk about Final Fantasy XVI and my thoughts on the game. I cleared the game on Friday. I've not gone back and done any of the New Game Plus modes yet. I'll get round to it eventually, but for now, we're just going to talk about Final Fantasy XVI. Now, this is going to be a no-spoiler review. I am not going to discuss any specific details about the story. I may do a separate video where we break down the story and talk about it, but in this video, no story spoilers. So there's nothing to worry about there, and yeah, let's just jump into this. This is my second attempt at recording this. The first one was far too long. I'm going to try and keep this as clean and concise as possible. Please do drop a like on the video and subscribe for future content, but let's get on with it. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is going to be the visuals. This one's pretty easy to talk about. This one's fine. The visuals are amazing. Like, aesthetically, this game is phenomenal. It is just the best looking Final Fantasy game that has ever been released. It is one of the best looking games that has ever been released. It's just beautiful. There are a few issues with the frame rate dropping in performance mode, so I played it in performance mode just because I prefer that, and you do still get quite a few drops in the frame rate. It is quite noticeable when it drops down closer to 30 from 60. You kind of get it stuttering a little bit here and there. That's a little bit of an issue. I am personally not the most bothered about that kind of thing. As long as it doesn't impact the gameplay, it's not a major issue for me. And in my opinion, it doesn't. For my playthrough, any kind of inconsistency with the frame rates didn't have any effect that I noticed as far as the gameplay. So, judging it just purely on how it looks, it's very beautiful. Photo mode is fun. I caught some brilliant snaps in photo mode while I was playing it. But the biggest issue with the photo mode is that it's a pretty basic one. Like, it's more basic than Final Fantasy VII Remake's photo mode. So, yeah, a few more options would have been nice. The ability to get a shot of the killing blow as you land it would have been nice. But the game does this thing where it pops off a chime and pops up text on the screen that says enemy defeated, or hunt defeated, or notorious mark slain, or whatever the situation is. And you can always see the shot that you want in the background behind it, but you can't pause it and open the photo mode. And by the time you can, the shot's gone. So that's a little bit annoying. It would be nice if there was an option maybe to just take a shot of the killing blow, or maybe just get rid of that quite annoying chime and text that pops up. Because it does get a little bit annoying over time. Even when you just kill a group of enemies, it pops up. But anyway, that's a completely separate thing. I'm getting ahead of myself. Photo mode, good because of how beautiful the game is, but it is extremely lacking in options for like things that you can do with the photo mode. So yeah, that would be an improvement. But in general, like I was saying, the visuals, very good in my opinion. I'm a big fan of the visuals. It looks beautiful, and you can definitely tell that a lot of focus has gone into making sure that the visuals do look good. And it's paid off. It's paid off. Which brings us to the music for Final Fantasy XVI. Now, I and a lot of other people came into the game with extremely high expectations as far as the music goes, and it didn't quite meet them for me. Like, there are a few tracks that are really good. There are a couple of tracks in there that are absolutely phenomenal. There are a couple of tracks in there that I'm not the biggest fan of, but on the whole, the music doesn't really stand out or do anything special for me. Maybe it's because I was streaming it when I played it and I wasn't particularly paying the most amount of attention to the music. But when the music was good, and it was really good at certain points, I noticed it. And when it was bad, and it was really bad at certain points for me, there was a couple of songs that I just genuinely didn't like, I noticed it. But a lot of it was just, yeah, it was just there. I didn't really notice it. It was just kind of going on in the background. But yeah, in general, the music, it didn't hit the highs that I was expecting it to hit. Like, it just didn't reach the levels that I was expecting. It was good. It wasn't in any way, shape or form bad. The fact that there was only one or two tracks that I didn't really like just says that itself. But yeah, in general, the music just became a bit of a non-thing for me. I just didn't really notice it that much. What do you think? Obviously, with any of these points, I'd love to know what your thoughts were about the game in the comments. Just be careful about posting spoilers, because there are people who haven't finished the game. So yeah, try and keep the spoilers comment free, but let me know what you think, roughly. And yeah, that's the easy bits out of the way, the visuals and the music. Now we're going to get into the fun stuff. So the next thing I want to talk about is kind of the systems and the customization options that you've got as far as the gameplay goes. And you've not got many. if I'm going to be completely honest. As someone who's come from Final Fantasy games that have an absolute plethora of options for you to choose from, whether that's a job-based system, a materia-based system, a junction-based system, whichever system it is, you always have a lot of options available to you. And in Final Fantasy XVI, you really don't. I mean, first up, we'll start with the gear. I mean, the gear is pretty boring in general. It's just a case of equip the strongest thing. So as you progress through the game, you'll be able to buy and have new items crafted for you. And each time you get one of them, you'll craft the item or buy the item. You'll upgrade it once or twice, which is a very linear thing. You can normally do it all in one go the moment that you get the weapon. If you're doing all the side quests and you're doing the hunts and stuff like that, anytime you unlock a new weapon, you can pretty much craft a weapon and upgrade it to its maximum level immediately, as soon as you've unlocked it, which in itself is a bit of a problem, and it just feeds into the general issues that I have with the gear system in this game. You only have 3 pieces of gear that you can actually equip, and then 3 accessory slots as well. Like I say, the gear that you equip doesn't really do anything other than boost your attack stat and your stagger stat. That's it. There's no real nuance to it or anything like that. It is literally just, ooh, you got stronger, well done. And as far as the accessories go, first off, the timely accessory is not needed at all, in my opinion, and we'll get to that. Most of the other accessories tend to focus on making the cooldown faster for one specific skill, and the fact that you've only got 3 slots kind of means that you probably don't want to waste your slots on any of them. I mean, I suppose it could be beneficial to speed certain icon abilities up. I played through the entirety of Final Fantasy XVI without equipping a single one of those icon ability upgrade accessories. Not necessary. The only things that I had equipped, there was one that boosts your attack a little bit, one that boosts your defense a little bit, and one that makes your potions work a little bit better. You get them reasonably early on in the game, and there are upgrades that become available for them as you progress through the game. That's it. That was literally all that I needed, and everything was fine. So I literally didn't change my accessories at any point. I didn't feel the necessity to change any of my accessories. And there's a reason for that, and we'll come to it. And it's the same story with the abilities, if I'm being completely honest. There's a little bit more diversity in the abilities. It kind of depends what you look for when you play in the game. But very quickly you'll find a pattern of attacks that works for you, that clears enemies quite quickly, and you'll stick with it. You'll genuinely stick with it. As long as you've got a couple of abilities that deal big stagger, as you know, so that you can stagger an enemy nice and quickly, and then 1 or 2 abilities that do big damage, you've got 2 spaces then for abilities to do whatever you want with, really. You can put more stagger in, you can put more damage in, you can split it between the 2. It's completely up to you. The problem is that that's all you've got. Like, they are the only options that you've got. So you'll have 6 ability slots, and I think it's somewhere in the vicinity of about 18 actual attacking abilities that you can use to fill those slots. So there's not a massive amount of diversity in there. There is a little bit, but it's not really needed, and again, we'll come to that soon. The main thing that you need to be looking at when you're choosing your abilities is A, how much stagger damage does this do, and B, how much damage does this do. And as long as you've got a decent balance of the 2, you'll be fine. You won't have any issues. So that's the gear and customization systems there, and there's just not really that much to it, and there is possibly a reason for that. I'm just not sure which way around it goes. I'm not sure if the combat informs the mechanics of the game and the customization options and the systems, or if the mechanics of the game and the systems that you can use to customize your character have informed the combat. I'm not sure which way around this goes. Maybe they were done hand in hand, that probably makes sense. But let's talk about the combat, because this is one of the biggest problems that I've got with this game. Now, I remember all of the talk that was thrown at us turn-based enjoyers, of which I am one. I am a turn-based enjoyer. I personally feel that Final Fantasy should always be turn-based in my opinion, but my opinion doesn't mean shit, or at least not that much, so it is what it is. But we were told, like, don't worry, turn-based players, we'll make it easy for you. There's accessories that you can wear that will make it easy for you. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. This is possibly the easiest Final Fantasy that I have ever played, and I have not used a single one of the timely accessories at any point during the game. I didn't use the boosted gil accessory that you get. I didn't use the XP boost, the 10% XP boost thing that you can get, because it's really not necessary. And I was tempted to at the start of the game, you know, use the XP boost. I'm so glad that I didn't, But I came into this game fully expecting that, you know, it was going to kick me in a little bit. I was expecting that I was going to be struggling with some of the bosses, struggling with some of the hunts, that I was going to die repeatedly. I thought it was going to be similar to like my God of War experience where, you know, you go and fight the Valkyries and they kick your teeth in for the best part of 45 minutes until you actually manage to beat them. I thought it was going to be something like that. That was far from the case with Final Fantasy XVI. Far from the case. Like I say, possibly the easiest Final Fantasy I've ever played, possibly one of the easiest action RPG games that I've ever played, and the game suffers because of it. Most of the encounters that you have are kind of built around letting off a chain of icon abilities, either to stagger the enemy, or once you've staggered the enemy in order to do damage, or both, which is kind of the strategy that I went with. I had 2 or 3 abilities that would deal massive amounts of stagger damage, and then I had 2 or 3 abilities that would deal huge amounts of damage. And you do change your abilities a little bit as you go through the game and you acquire new abilities, but as I said in the previous section, you don't acquire a massive amount of abilities, and because you've only got one character, which is something we'll come around to later as well, but because you've only got that one character, you feel the impact more. Whereas in other games, like, yeah, one character might only have 18 abilities, but the next character's got that many, the next character's got that many, etc, etc, etc. Whereas in this game, you just have Clive and his abilities. So that is one of the reasons why the combat feels a bit bland. There are limited options for you to deploy in combat. It's very limited in the options that you've got. There are no elemental weaknesses in the game, there are no status effects in the games, there are no status weaknesses in the game. You do get a hit occasionally with something like a poison mist attack, but all that happens is you lie down for a couple of seconds and then you stand up. So, yeah. And in that time, they probably don't hit you once. So it's pretty pointless. Let's be honest, it's pretty pointless. I died twice in my entire playthrough, and both of them were down to stupidity. The first one, I stumbled across the first hunt that you find, if you know you know, and I didn't realise that he'd cast Doom on me, and I stayed in the circle. I mean, I didn't intentionally stay on the circle. I did notice eventually, but it was too late by the time I noticed. I'm pretty sure I pressed circle to dodge out of the circle as well the first time, so I had no chance of getting to the edge. One hit KO, down. Went back, kicked the shit out of him. The other one was one of the hardest hunts, has a similar one-hit KO attack, if you know you know. And I thought, oh, he's using his one-hit KO attack here, this has got to be a one-hit KO attack. I know what I'm going to do, he's really close to being staggered, so I'm just going to try and push him over the edge and stop the attack that way. I did not push him over the edge quick enough, but again, went straight back, stomped him. They are my only 2 deaths in the entirety of Final Fantasy XVI, and that is including every single hunt, including Svarog, who is a beast and is probably the hardest fight in the game. Even he got me down close once. He got me down to like red HP once, and I just used an elixir and carried on and beat the shit out of him. So the difficulty just isn't there in the first playthrough of Final Fantasy XVI. I've heard a lot of people saying that when you unlock New Game Plus and you can get into Final Fantasy difficulty and Ultimaniac difficulty, I believe it is, things improve. But first off, I kind of doubt that, because there's not going to be new accessories and new abilities and stuff like that that I can acquire, so it's still going to be the same bland combat with not many choices. I'm probably just going to be fighting an enemy that maybe has double the HP and might have one new attack, or maybe his attacks are a little bit quicker. So yeah, I can see it being slightly more difficult, but I can't see it being much more enjoyable, if I'm being completely honest with you. I would have much preferred if they would have worked some of that stuff into the actual first playthrough of the game, rather than keeping it for a second playthrough and a third playthrough that I personally don't think everyone's going to do. First off, not everybody's got the time to be putting 2 or 3 playthroughs into Final Fantasy XVI, so their lasting memory of the game is probably going to be that first playthrough, and they're probably not going to do it again. And then you've got people who might play it again, they might have the time to play through Final Fantasy XVI again, but because the first playthrough was so bland as far as combat goes and difficulty goes and things like that, maybe they don't waste the time coming back to it, and they don't explore these additional difficulty levels. I am going to check out the harder difficulty levels at some point, probably in a couple of weeks over on Twitch, but yeah, I'm not feeling the drive to get back into the game and go again. I'm not feeling that. The combat just didn't grab me. Another thing with the combat as well, there's a big reliance on floor mechanics. And obviously that's a heavy MMO influence. I'm not the biggest fan of floor mechanics. They just annoy me. And there's a lot of them. There's a hell of a lot of them. You can definitely feel the MMO influence coming through from the Final Fantasy XIV team into some of the combat. I just wish there was more to it. It's not really got the depth that I'm looking for. It's not got the difficulty that I'm looking for. It just gets boring, if I'm being completely honest with you. It just gets boring to the point where I'm glad that the fight is over purely so that I can get to the next story beat. There are, like I say, one or two exceptions, like the ultimate hunt, the Svarog fight, but that's supposed to be the hardest fight in the main playthrough, the first playthrough as far as I can tell, and it was a cakewalk, pretty much. Like, I panicked once. There was one moment of actual panic, and I was a bit distracted because Baby Seal just raided me with like 37 people, so you know, there was a little bit of nervousness kicking in there as well, and I still got through it. So yeah, combat, not the best. And especially after being told for months and months and months that, oh, you turn-based kids, don't worry, there'll be things in there to make it easy for you. They're not needed. The game itself is easy. So, yeah. And I don't know if that's possibly the reason for it. Maybe they've overcompensated because they were worried that people who enjoy the turn-based Final Fantasies wouldn't be able to play this one, and it's just a bit silly, to be fair. They've definitely overcorrected, if that's the case. And the game suffers massively because of it. The game suffers massively because of it. But there is another thing that the game suffers massively because of, and that is the side quests. Oh my god. Genuinely, one of my biggest problems with Final Fantasy XIV is the wall of side quests that you get in between each main narrative beat that just slow you down, take you out of the immersion, ruin any kind of momentum that you may have built up, and just sap the life out of you. And Final Fantasy XVI does all of that just as well as Final Fantasy XIV does. It really does. It really does. Every time you get past a major story beat, you will be hit with a wall of side quests. Now don't get me wrong, some of the side quests are reasonably good once you get later into the game. And when I say reasonably good, I mean from a narrative perspective, from a character building perspective. Like later on in the game, there are several walls of side quests that you will have to overcome in this game. And the last one, which is the biggest one, has some of the better narrative and character developing quests in there. You know, you get bits of lore, you get bits of resolution for certain characters, and it's nice. But the problem is, most of the other side quests in the game aren't that. They're just pretty boring. In the early stages of the game, it constantly drives home the fact that the bearers have got a really bad time and everybody else treats the bearers like shit. And I got it after like the second or third side quest referring to it. After about another 20, I was pretty bored of it. There was only one or two of them that were good. The Chloe side quest. If you know, you know. That one was okay. The one with the boy and the wolf nearby, that one was okay. There were a couple of others that were okay. But the main problem with the side quests in Final Fantasy XVI isn't necessarily the story implications with them, and it isn't necessarily how many of them there are. It's simply the fact that they're just bland, tepid fetch quests, for the most part. Like, pretty much everything is that same MMO formula that we all know and love. Go speak to a person, oh, I need an item, please go and get me this item. So you go to a place to get an item, and the person that you're supposed to get the item off, oh, I've not got that item. Something's happened to my courier, he's been attacked by bandits, go help. Go there, kill thing, get item, bring it back. Done. And most times it's not even as difficult as that. Like, sometimes you just take some plates around to some people and give them some food. Sometimes you just go somewhere, kill something, come back. Sometimes you just go to a field and pick a flower and bring it back. Like, I can see what they've tried to do. They've tried to build the world, and some of them do a great job of building and expanding the world and giving you that context around the world. But there's that many of them, and they're that uninspired as far as the mechanics of them go, that you just stop caring. And I personally, I was reaching a point where I was quite happy to skip through the dialogue in the side quests once I'd seen what I needed to do, or once I'd seen the important bit of the text. I was kind of like, skip through it, right, nothing important there, skip through it, nothing important there. You know, just quickly skim each line rather than waiting for the line to be delivered, because I was just done. Like, that final wall of side quests took me 4 hours to clear before I could go and finish the game. And again, it comes back to my issue with Final Fantasy XIV. the story is not very enjoyable to me because the pacing of it is awful, because you're constantly jammed up by all these side quests everywhere. And that's an MMO thing, and that's kind of why MMOs aren't for me. But in Final Fantasy XVI it's the same, and the constant walls of side quests that aren't really compelling and aren't really difficult and aren't really interesting just take you away from the story, and they break up the flow of the story. And I genuinely feel if you probably took half of the side quests out of the game, it'd flow a lot better. It would feed into another problem that I've got, but yeah, I think it'd streamline the game a lot if you just got rid of some of those pointless quests. It genuinely would. And one thing that you could do to replace them would be to add in some sort of explorable location. I think they're called dungeons. I'm pretty sure I've seen them before in Final Fantasy games. You know, just random locations where you can go, you can explore, you can get into some fights. You might find something shiny in there if you're lucky. You know, those places. Yeah, there's none of them in Final Fantasy XVI. So maybe if we chopped off some of the pointless side quests and replaced them with just 1 or 2 locations that you can just go and explore that aren't really narrative significant, but they've got something in them for you. Or maybe they do feed into the narrative in some way, I don't know. But every single side quest just hits the same formula and it becomes boring. Just like the combat. It genuinely becomes boring. And because there's no dungeons, and because the side quests are boring, and because there's no difficulty really in the combat, there's not really a reason to explore the world unless you're just looking for a hunt. You know, you've gone to the hunt board and you're just like, right, it's in this area, right, I'm going to go find that. That's it. That's all there is. And it's pretty disappointing. It is very disappointing. Yeah, side quests, not good. Not good. Some of them narratively good and character development good later on in the game, but 80% of them are useless. Not a fan. And really quickly before I get into the final part of this review, the party are pretty useless as well. Like, they help a little bit in combat, but on the whole they're pretty pointless. They don't really interact with you while you're running around in the world, only kind of like just after a quest or just as you leave a town. There'll be a scripted moment where they're meant to say something, but as far as just bantering while you're walking around, nothing. Non-existent. Or at least I didn't notice it. Let me know if I'm wrong on that one. But yeah, the party was pretty pointless. They do minimal amounts of damage for the most part. Torgal was fun, but I didn't use him at any point. I just left him doing his own thing, vibing in the corner. If he wanted to kill stuff, he could kill stuff. If he didn't, it's fine. I've got it. Everything's good. But yeah, finally, let's just talk about the story. And the story is one of the least offensive things to me about this game. I've seen some people saying that the story was disappointing to them, that the story kind of falls off a cliff in the final third. I wouldn't go so far. I would not go so far as that. I think it's an okay story. I think it leans a little bit too heavily on Game of Thrones. There's a lot of moments where you're kind of looking at a scene, it's like, oh, this is near enough pulled from Game of Thrones. Or where you're looking at a certain character, and it's like, oh, well, she's definitely modelled on that person. And if you know, you know. In fact, no, to be fair, Annabella is obviously Cersei Lannister. Come on, let's just be real about this. So there's one of them. There are several others. Several others. I won't go into any details because I don't want to spoil things, and I would spoil things if I started discussing them too much in depth. But yeah, for me, it leans a little bit too heavily on the old Game of Thrones. It starts off really strong as a story. I think the first third is very solid and very well done. There is a point, I will say, after you visit your first Mother Crystal, things do start to tail off a little bit. I don't think they go off a cliff like certain other reviewers have suggested, but it's obviously subjective. Different people are going to have different experiences and feelings about the story, so, you know, don't attack people over their opinions. It is subjective. For me, it did get worse, but not much worse. It kind of maintained. Most of the characters in the story are really enjoyable, be that the other dominants or the people that you work with. All of them are quite fun. I think that's one of the things that this game's done really well. The characterizations, the voice acting, all of that sort of business. Spot on. Like, they've done a really good job with that as far as I'm concerned. So that's a big positive, and it helps the story a lot. You know, you actually care about some of the characters. You do get invested in some of the characters and what's going on with them. This is why some of the latter side quests, like I was saying earlier, when you get into that final wall of side quests, some of them are really good because it feeds into these characters and it expands on these characters a little bit more, and that's beneficial. One of the dominants ended up being a massive disappointment, if you know, you know. And the big bad evil guy's pretty rubbish as well, if I'm being honest with you. He doesn't really hit the right notes for me. He comes across pretty bland, and I get that that's kind of the thing. Again, not too many details. But yeah, I'm not a big fan of the big bad evil guy. It's a story that we've kind of seen before, and it's done reasonably well in Final Fantasy XVI, but it's nothing groundbreaking, if I'm being honest with you. Yeah, the story, it's serviceable. It's okay. It's like an 8 out of 10 story for me, a 7.5 out of 10 story for me. It's nothing phenomenal. It's nothing bad. The character work definitely brings it up. Like, the characters, the performances, the relationships between the characters, they definitely boost the quality of this game. 100%. 100%. And I will do a future video where we go fully into the spoilers and we discuss the actual minutiae of the story and we talk about what actually happens. But just in general, a little bit underwhelming, but not bad. That's kind of my take on it. Very middle of the road. Very mid. Very mid. Mid's amazing, by the way. Mid is one of the best characters in the game. Just throwing that out there. But yeah, that's each of the various sections of Final Fantasy XVI that I've kind of discussed there. And in my script, I've just kind of wrote conclusion. Meh. See how I feel after this rant. So, yeah, let's see how I feel. Let's see how I feel. I kind of feel disappointed. I don't know if disappointed's the right word. I think it is. Like, I was kind of sold by all the trailers that this was going to be a big change in the franchise, and this is it. This is the future of Final Fantasy. And I'm going to be honest, if this is the future of Final Fantasy, it ain't going to be pretty, because it was just quite a bland game. It was very style over substance for me in a lot of ways. There's not really any depth to the mechanics of the game. There's not really that much depth to the combat of the game. I've seen people, like, in practice mode pulling off massive combos and stuff like that, and it's like, what's the point? I don't need to do that to win the fight. Why are you doing pointless things? And I get it. People are doing things for their enjoyment, but it's not necessary. So I'm much more of an efficient gamer. I will do things in the most efficient way. That is fun to me. That is where I get my enjoyment from. And doing things in the most efficient way smashes this game to pieces. And to be fair, I reached a point where I wasn't even doing things in the most efficient way. I was just kind of talking to chat and just doing icon abilities in the background and killing everything. The difficulty is non-existent. The depth of system and the complexity of the mechanics of the game, non-existent. Side quests, I wish they were non-existent because they're awful. There are a few really good things about Final Fantasy XVI. The visuals, the music has its moments, the characters, the interactions between the characters. But then there's so much that brings the game down and negates all of that almost. Yeah, it's a bit of a shame, if I'm being honest with you. I'm disappointed. I am disappointed. We put a lot of time into the game on the channel. We put a lot of time into the story and speculating about things. And it's just a little bit disappointing that it feels so flat to me. Like, yeah. And I'm not the only one. I know a lot of people that have had a similar experience with the game. I suppose the only thing to do now is kind of get your opinions on it and give it a score, I suppose. That's what people do, innit? People give it a score. If I was going to give a score, it's probably sitting around a 7.5 for me. I don't think I can go much higher than that. The best parts of this game, like the visuals are a solid 9, 9.5 out of 10. The story, it's like an 8, 8.5 out of 10, something like that. But then when you come to things like the combat and the side quests and everything like that, it drags it down considerably. Like, I'm probably being quite generous giving it a 7.5 in my mind, but I feel like that's probably reasonable. If what you're looking for is just a chilled out action game that you can play through, do some of the side quests, enjoy the story, you know, just pretty casually play through it, you'll probably enjoy it a fair bit, and you probably have a good time. You will probably have a good time. But if you're coming into this looking for any kind of depth, any kind of mechanics, any kind of difficulty, any kind of, yeah, just depth, I think depth is probably the best word to use to describe what's missing from this game, because it's definitely missing depth. Let me know what you thought in the comments below, but please do remember, no spoilers, because there are people that haven't finished it yet. So please be conscientious of other viewers and just be careful what you say in the comments below. But yeah, let me know what you're thinking. What did you think of Final Fantasy XVI? What was your experience with it? Did you enjoy it more than me? Did you enjoy it less than me? Let's just talk about it, but be nice to each other. Let's just be nice, okay? But yeah, that's it from me. So don't forget, drop a like on the video, subscribe for future content, but more importantly than all of that, have a great day.